Welcome to Who Wrote That Up for You, a daily podcast that shines a light on the American justice system and its role in empowering the powerful to take from you. The justice system is the only branch of your government where an individual, rather than the collective, can make the system act for you. It puts power in the individual's hands, but it's broken and being used against you at a time when you need it most.
And we are live on Who Wrote That Up for You. Today is Wednesday, October 12th, 2022. I am Sonia Ebron, a co-founder at Courtroom 5.
And I am Deborah Sloan, the other co-founder at Courtroom 5.
We have a marvelous, very informative show for you today. In a few moments, we will speak with Tom Gordon. Tom is the Executive Director of Responsive Law. It's an advocacy organization for consumers with respect to regulatory affairs. We'll talk about some of the regulatory barriers that keep people from getting affordable legal solutions. But before we get there, Deborah, what is on your mind today? What is the issue of the day?
Well, first of all, yesterday we closed out the series on things that make pro se litigants lose. And although we'll revisit a lot of those points in the future, we pretty much closed out that particular series. So we want to start today with peculiar law things. Uh, I was reading an article out of San Antonio that reported that it is difficult to find a lawyer who specializes in employment law, that people were looking for people to represent them in employment law, but most of the lawyers represent the employers or a corporate entity. And so the pro se litigants, people who aren't represented yet, are looking around for lawyers to represent them on that particular thing. And oftentimes they'll go to personal injury lawyers because they're more available, because they advertise or they work on contingency, but they're basically not finding what they need. And so my point is that the there's a kind of a mismatch between all the lawyers that need clients, which are quite a few, and all the people that need lawyers, which are quite a few. Now, for most of them, they probably can't afford a lawyer. But for people who can and are looking around for lawyers and they just aren't there because they represent the other side, I think it's a sad thing. That's a huge mismatch, and I'm not sure there's another industry that has that particular thing going on, except the legal industry, So I think there needs to be a lot of work in that direction.
That's really interesting, and certainly that's those kinds of industries are ripe for disruption. Certainly, something that we are hoping to change at Courtroom 5. You remind me, we've heard from a lot of people over the years in those situations. Sometimes in small towns where the kind of matter they need handled by a lawyer
Yeah.
is difficult because all the lawyers work for the people who would be on the other side. And I've been
Exactly.
thinking recently that maybe the changes the courts made in response to the pandemic, where you might have a wider group of lawyers to talk to, right? Because things were on Zoom, and more lawyers might be able to serve you electronically. But
Mm.
I think probably not, because most law is handled at specific courthouses. In other words, those local rules matter a
Mm.
lot in the way lawyers practice, at least. And so I'm not so sure that lawyers are happy working statewide
Mm.
as I had hoped. So I think that still is a challenge, as you indicate. I love the term, though. Your new series, you say, is called Peculiar Law. Peculiar law. That sounded, when you first said it, like a branch of law, right? A new practice area for lawyers. It may
Hey.
be. It may be, right? Maybe you're one of those lawyers that works for people in small towns that can't otherwise find a lawyer, and you come in as the peculiar lawyer, right? The new practice area. That
That's
would be fun.
funny.
At any rate, that's great. Thanks for bringing that to our attention. Who Wrote That Up for You is sponsored by Courtroom 5. At Courtroom 5, we believe the courts belong to the people, and we, the people, are coming to claim our courts. And so, if you are in court without a lawyer, or you need to sue someone and can't find a lawyer to represent you, get yourself over to courtroom5.com. Try a limited version of our services for free, and we hope we can provide some relief for you there. At this time, it's my great pleasure to bring onto the show Tom Gordon, again, Executive Director at Responsive Law. Tom, thank you for joining Who Wrote That Up for You.
Thanks for having me.
Now, Tom, you and I have talked for a little while about some of the regulatory barriers that keep people from getting affordable legal solutions. But I want to begin by dialing it way back and just laying some background for our audience. Who are the regulators, rather? What
Mhm.
agencies affect the delivery of legal services? And
Yeah,
what enforce? What are they enforcing?
yep. That's a really great place to start because it's very different from what you see in regulation of pretty much any other industry. In every other industry, there is regulation by some combination of the legislative branch and the executive branch. And those are branches that are really designed to set policy that affects the greater public. In the legal industry, regulation is nearly exclusively by the judicial branch, including state bar associations. So state supreme courts and state bar associations, depending on your state or some combination of them, act as regulators of the legal industry. And this is really kind of a mismatch. On the one hand, there is some expertise on the legal system residing in those bodies, but on the other hand, state supreme courts, you don't get to become a state supreme court justice because of your skill as a regulator. You get there because you have skill in analyzing legal problems and resolving legal disputes. And you get to be a leader in the state bar by doing generally what's good for lawyers. So you've got a regulatory capture in a very formalized way when state bars are the ones doing the regulation.
Wow, that's fantastic explanation of the dynamic there. Well, what are the regulations then that are being enforced?
So there's a lot of regulations, and some of them are basically what how this happens is it's through regulations of the professional conduct of lawyers, and so some of these are always framed as ethical regulations. They're rules of ethics, rules of lawyer ethics, or rules of professional conduct, and some of them are things that are truly just ethics issues, like the fact that lawyers should keep their clients' matters confidential. That's clearly an ethics issue and one that is pretty much a no-brainer. On the other hand, there are restrictions on who can provide legal advice or legal information, and those are under the what's considered the unauthorized practice of law. That's sometimes done by a state legislature, but often there's a big role for the courts and bars in that as well. There's also restrictions on who lawyers can share their fees with, and that seems like a very sort of arcane area, but it has a great impact on the regulation of the legal industry, because what that means is that a lawyer not only can't take money from a client's fee and share it with some other person, but also means they can't take investment from any outside party. They can't go into business with a non-lawyer. They can't accept venture capital from non-lawyers. So really, the only way what this does is this prevents legal businesses from scaling up to a point where they would be able to provide services more efficiently and more affordably to the public.
You know, it's interesting because there is also some flexibility in the enforcement of those regulations, it seems to me. On that last point, for instance, so a lawyer can't split fees with other persons, but I think most state bars allow lawyers to split their fees with a payment processor. For instance, if they want to take a credit card, right? There's a payment fee. There's a percentage of the payment that goes to Stripe or whatever your payment processor might be. And so there's some flexibility there. There's obviously fee splitting going on, right there. And so how does the enforcement, I guess, of those various regulations limit the ability of people to get affordable legal services? What have you seen there?
So the credit card example is a really interesting one because up until sometime in, I believe, the 1970s, lawyers actually weren't allowed to take credit cards in many jurisdictions. And what happened was there was no actual change to the written regulations about to these rules governing fee splitting. It was just that eventually courts and bars that were regulating these things decided, you know what, credit card processing actually isn't really fee splitting in the way we generally think about it. So you're right, the regulation didn't change, it was just the enforcement that changed, and they decided through formal opinions that this didn't mean what it said it did in the first place. So we'd really like to see that sort of logic applied to other areas where in any other industry you would see sharing of payments. You'd see sharing. One place where this happens prominently is with lawyer advertising sites and attorney-client matching sites, where you know there's people paying for advertising. There's companies that pay, and there's lawyers that pay for advertising, um, and what you'll often see is state bars take a varying approach to what sorts of things are allowed. Can you have a pay-per-click advertising? Can you have a pay per referral advertising? And all these things are, have a, like I said, a wide range of degrees of enforcement and types of enforcement. And one way that we could fix all this, of course, is to abolish this rule regarding sharing of fees with non-lawyers, and that would open up a large range of affordable legal services that have, in many cases, yet to be created or have been hamstrung in their creation.
Fantastic, fantastic. And so we do see just some difficulty in organizations trying to make legal services more affordable for consumers. And there are various reasons for that. Certainly, the average rate of lawyers continues to increase, hourly rate for lawyers. But how exactly do these regulations, right, this regulatory environment, stymie the provision of those types of services? Are there some examples you can share?
Yeah, well, actually, Deborah shared a great example a few minutes ago when she talked about the lack of employment lawyers for employees, not for companies. I think she said in San Antonio, which should be a large market where there should be plenty of folks available. The problem is that those folks, to the extent they're there, exist in very small firms. Large firms, when you think of a large law firm, that's a firm that's representing corporations, representing the very rich. But when you're looking at the people law sector, things with like people with employment problems, with landlord-tenant issues, with consumer issues. These are things that are handled by firms of just one or two or three attorneys. If it's a 5-attorney firm, that's a large firm for people law. And so most people don't go to law school to say, I'm going to go to law school so I can run a small business. Some people do great at it, and they provide great services through their law firm, through their small law firm. But most of them would prefer to just practice law all the time and do it in a way that's efficient and affordable for people. And those businesses don't exist. You don't have, an H&R Block of law firms where you could have a national brand that provides services that are standardized across all sorts of areas, and of course all sorts of different types of subject areas. So you don't have that because lawyers can't make that happen. They can't put their own money in. They can't get venture capital to make it happen. They can't get any sort of outside investment because of this prohibition on fee sharing. And so attorneys, therefore can't serve the people they'd like to be serving because there's no structure available because the regulations are stopping it.
Exactly. Fantastic. Tom, you're one of the most knowledgeable persons on this issue. I want to talk in a moment about what responsive law does to address some of these issues. But we're going to take a quick break, let Deborah handle our daily challenge, and then we'll come right back. Fascinating, fascinating. Looking
Yes,
forward
it
to the second
is.
part of that conversation. So, Deborah, who won yesterday's challenge, if anyone? And what do you have teed up for us today?
We actually had a winner. The question was, which of the following best describes material facts? Is it A, facts that are the true and related to the case? B, facts that are undisputed by any party? C, facts that are relevant and logically connected to the merits of a case? And D, facts that the judge wants to hear in order to render a judgment. And of course, it's C, facts that are relevant and logical and logically connected to the merits of a case. And the winner was Esther N.
Congratulations to Esther there.
And today's quiz, in the lawsuit that we've had over the weeks that Kelsey filed against Dr. Fig Newton for medical malpractice, Kelsey, who is pro se, representing herself, objects to one of Dr. Newton's discovery requests based on work product privilege. What does Kelsey mean? If you want to participate in the quiz, send your responses to quiz@courtroom5.com.
Looking forward to hopefully a new winner there tomorrow. Fantastic. Well, let's bring back Tom Gordon. Thank you, Tom, again for joining us on Who Wrote That Up for You. We ended a few minutes, couple minutes ago, talking about some of the examples of regulations and regulatory enforcement that sort of limit the ability of law firms and others to make legal services available. What is responsive law, and how are you addressing some of those issues?
Thanks. Responsive Law is a national nonprofit organization. We are the only national organization that represents the interests of consumers in the legal system, people who are everyday people with everyday legal issues who can't get affordable legal help. And unfortunately, we're not a legal services organization. We don't provide direct legal services. What we do, though, is we try to fix these policies that are standing between people and affordable, accessible legal help. And we do that by advocating in front of state bar associations, state Supreme Courts, the American Bar Association, occasionally state legislatures, when they're dealing with these regulatory issues.
I know, for instance, that you had an amicus brief, I believe, in a recent case down in Florida. The ticket traffic ticket solutions provider that was effectively run out of business by some of the regulatory enforcement there. Can you tell us a bit about the advocacy that you do in cases like that?
Sure. So this was a really interesting situation where there was a company called Ticked, which basically had an app which would let you scan a traffic ticket in the jurisdictions where they operated, and it would then, let's say it was a $100 ticket, they would use data about how likely that ticket was to get dismissed. And if it's a $100 ticket, they might say, okay, for $75, we will take care of this ticket. What that means is they will get a lawyer to represent you. You could choose a different one if you wanted, or take the one they would provide you. And they would just take care of everything from there. And the lawyer would represent you in your traffic case. If the lawyer got the case dismissed, Ticked kept the $75 you paid them. If they didn't get it dismissed, Ticked would pay the difference between that and the $100 for the ticket. And of course, the lawyer gets paid as well, and Ticked makes some money. So everybody comes out ahead on this, except for some other lawyers who were previously the ones who were the leaders in traffic ticket defense. And so a law firm called the Ticket Clinic, which 20 years previously had been the innovators in doing statewide traffic defense and really doing all that scalable work and helping people efficiently with traffic tickets and focusing on that area, they weren't happy about this because this was the competition. And so rather than try to change their business model, they convinced the Florida bar to bring an unauthorized practice of law case against Ticked, this company. And this basically ended up before the Florida Supreme Court. The Florida Supreme Court said, they found that this company Ticked was not doing anything but helping consumers. There was no evidence that there had been consumer harm. And they even said in their opinion that this company Ticked was really providing a great service to people who were underrepresented. By the way, Responsive Law filed an amicus brief in this case, pointing out the consumer interest in all of this. So anyway, the ultimate decision was, even though this company Ticked was providing great services, no evidence of consumer harm, they were still in violation of the unauthorized practice of law restrictions in Florida. And the Supreme Court said, we really, really wish that we could do something about that, but we just can't. The ironic thing about that is, guess who makes the unauthorized practice of law regulations in Florida?
The Florida Supreme Court.
The Florida Supreme Court. So it's a very, Monty Python-esque sketch where, almost like where you would have someone saying, oh, I'm sorry, I can't help you with this window. You'll have to go to the next window, and the same person shows up there. But the Florida Supreme Court has done nothing to really to change this, despite their power to do so. In fact, they've rejected some attempts from folks to do this through the regulatory process, and they're still not allowing companies like TIC to provide that sort of service, much to the detriment of everybody in Florida.
It really is. It really is a sad outcome there, and I was particularly disturbed because, as you pointed out, this is interference in the market that's destructive to the market itself. Instead of fairly competing, with a new innovator, right, and improving your business model, this company complained about it to the Florida bar, right, to a regulatory agency, instead of doing a better job to serve consumers and winning the market on its own. And that is just the wrong way to use a regulatory, authority there. I love regulators. I think they really help a market, do a better job. But in this instance, they help the market do a worse job. Right? It's just terrible, terrible outcome there. So thank you for that, and thank you for your amicus brief in that situation. I know you do that in a number of different areas, so around the country, because these issues continue to arise. More recently in California, we saw California effectively ban any experimentation with the regulatory environment, and I know you had some input on that discussion as well. And so you're a very busy guy in that realm. We appreciate the work. Is there anything on the horizon for you that you've got your eyes on in terms of regulatory change?
So we are looking at, Michigan is one of the states where there's some early regulatory reform efforts underway. There's also some early efforts in North Carolina where you are. And we're looking forward to speaking on behalf of the public and pointing out the need for these sorts of changes to how people can access legal services.
It's fantastic to have such a knowledgeable voice on behalf of consumers in this area. Really appreciate the work you do. Before we go, Tom, I know you have a fundraiser coming up. Just want to give you an opportunity to share some information about that and perhaps invite the public to participate.
Sure. Yeah, for folks who are in the Durham, North Carolina area, we're having an event on Monday, November 14th to help raise money for our mission. There's no ticket purchase required, but we do hope that people will go online to donate and register to attend. It's Monday, November 14th, 5 p.m. And if you want more information, we don't have a public link right now, but you can email info@responsivelaw.org to have us send you the link for that event.
That is awesome. I will certainly see you there. And so I know you are, Tom, at responsivelaw.org. And so anyone who's interested can certainly visit you there. Where else can people find you online?
They can find me on Twitter. It's @responsivelaw. That's the main place where you'll find some of our comments as well. And I'm also on Twitter personally it's @a Tom Gordon.
A Tom
Someday
Gordon.
I hope to be the Tom Gordon.
It's fairly common, I expect. But there is only one Tom Gordon at Responsive Law. And so really appreciate the work you do, Tom. Obviously, we'll continue to follow your very important work, and we'll have you back on. Thanks so much for joining us on Who Wrote That Up for You.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Tom.
Fantastic
Wow,
work
wow.
to know
There's a
that.
theme here. There's a theme here. I'm telling you, peculiar law things. Okay, I mean, look, isn't that a monopoly kind of? I mean, the SEC shouldn't the SEC be kind of on this? I
or,
mean,
or the
it's
FTC, somebody. Yeah,
yeah,
exactly.
yeah,
Yeah.
because it's the whole structure is from top to bottom. I mean, Supreme Court all the way down to a solo law firm that they have these strenuous regulations that really make it so that people can't really compete with
Yep.
lawyers.
Fox Garden and Hen House. That's
Yeah,
exactly right.
yeah, yeah,
It's an
absolutely.
ethical issue all the way through, as
Mhm.
Tom pointed out. So fantastic, but we've got eyes on it. Got very knowledgeable folks like Tom working to make some change, and he is
I
having an
love that.
impact. So let's
Hmm.
continue to wish him well.
Absolutely.
Fantastic. That's all we've got for you today. We, as always, will see you tomorrow on Wednesday. If you've got an answer to that quiz, we want to see a winner there. So, but thanks everybody for joining us, and we will see you all tomorrow.
Are you feeling beleaguered, angry, or afraid, as if things are spinning out of control and you're powerless to stop them? It's easy to just let things slide and hope they don't get worse. But they often do get worse. The thing is, you're not powerless. Our courts belong to us, and their purpose is to give power to the powerless. Don't let your grievances pile up without redressing them. You can handle this in court. Or, if someone takes you to court, you can take them to school.